UN 영어뉴스 How the UAE got a spacecraft to Mars on the first try. In 2020, the UAE's space agency launched its first Mars mission, less than a decade after it was created. How did they manage it? On 19 July 2020, a few months into a global pandemic that had paralyzed the world, a rocket shot into the sky from the Japanese space launch site on its southerly island of Tanegashima. Aboard was a small spacecraft, a little over 2 meters wide and weighing about as much as a Ford Focus car. On board it were a host of cameras and spectrometers, vital for its impending mission, one which would take it more than 493 million kilometers from Earth. Perched on top of its gold body was a large black radio antenna, which would beam its data across the vast, cold abyss of space to controllers sitting at their monitors. The spaceship was called Hope. It was not American or Russian or from the European Union. Hope was the first spacecraft from the United Arab Emirates Space Agency, UAE, to travel further than an orbit around the Earth. If successful, it would be the first spacecraft from an Arab nation to reach Mars, and the UAE would become only the fifth nation in the world to successfully put a spaceship in orbit around Mars. As the United Arab Emirates UAE prepared to mark its 50th year, its space agency bet its reputation on putting a spaceship into orbit around Mars on the first attempt to beam back details of Martian weather that had never been observed before. Just 6 years before the launch, the UAE's space agency didn't even exist. The Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center (MBRSC) lies at the far end of Dubai International Airport, about half an hour's drive east of the Burj Khalifa. By Space Center standards, it is relatively compact. You could probably lose it in the car park of NASA's giant Jones Space Center in Houston. The collection of offices, workshops, and clean rooms here is the nerve center of the UAE, still less than a decade old. It is from here that much of the work to guide the Emirates Mars mission to the Red Planet was undertaken. When I visited UAE in February 2022, it was a year since Hope had reached the end of its nearly 500 million kilometer journey from Earth and was poised to enter orbit around Mars. Getting this far was some achievement, especially for a space agency with such limited experience. The UAE had become only the fifth nation after the US, Russia, China, and India to reach Mars, and only the second space agency to succeed on the first attempt after India. It is one of the space industry's most ambitious newcomers. It was only inaugurated in 2014, a 6-year attempt to forge a pan-Arab space program modeled on the European Space Agency failed to materialize. This spurred the UAE to develop their own space agency and may help explain its fast-forward approach ever since. The UAE had launched 7 satellites before its space agency came into being, all of them built by foreign companies such as Europe's EADS, Boeing in the US, and South Korea's spacecraft initiative. It was only in 2018 that the nation was able to actually design its own, the Khalifa-Sat Earth-sensing satellite, which was built by a team of Emirati engineers in South Korea and spacecraft initiative's facilities. Khalifa-Sat launched in 2018, sent into orbit aboard a Proton rocket from Kazakhstan's Baikonur space drone. Its high-resolution images of Earth, taken from some 613 km above the Earth, could be used for everything from urban planning to disaster relief. But the satellite had other objectives as well, kickstarting a scratch-built space industry in the Emirates. In February 2022, Omran Sharaf was leading the Emirates Mars mission. Sharaf 38 says the inspiration for the mission was the triple helix model, in which you have the private sector, the government, and the academics, to have that overlap happening, and not having each sector working as silos. With this, the UAE had staked its claim at becoming one of the 21st century's leading space agencies. In the Cold War, such developments would have seemed far-fetched, but space exploration in the 2020s is a very different beast. The space race, dominated by the geopolitical rivalry of the US and the Soviet Union, has fragmented and now involves many more players, both commercial entities like America's SpaceX and upstart agencies from relatively small countries like the UAE. In previous decades, space programs that had successfully put satellites into orbit then turned their attention towards our nearest neighbor, the Moon, but not the UAE. The UAE had no time to wait, and needed to expedite and speed up the building of these capacities. So it looked at Mars to do that. Sharaf says the deadline was for the mission to achieve Mars orbit before the country celebrated its Golden Jubilee in October 2021. The nascent space industry's potential may have been helped by the crash in the Gulf states' aviation sector during the coronavirus pandemic. Long-haul hubs such as Dubai and Abu Dhabi had fallen almost silent as travel bans took hold. In 2018, the aviation sector was responsible for almost a quarter of the country's GDP and was expected to make nearly half by 2030. Before the pandemic happened, the country has now had to look and other ways to keep its economy buoyant. The Emirates Mars mission was not just about waving the UAE flag on the world stage. At the heart of it was the intent to produce the most complete picture of Mars weather cycles yet observed. The spacecraft would study Mars with three main instruments. The first was a high-resolution imaging unit able to measure water, ice, dust, and aerosols in the planet's atmosphere. An infrared spectrometer would monitor radiance from the planet's surface and atmosphere, measuring the surface temperature and amounts of dust in the atmosphere. Hope's ultraviolet spectrometer, meanwhile, would measure the planet's entire atmosphere and study its levels of hydrogen and oxygen, the building blocks of water, the key to life. While more than 30 spacecraft and landers had visited the red planet, most had only caught snapshots of the planet's weather. Hope intended to do something much more ambitious, covering an orbit that would allow it to make a global snapshot of the Martian climate and follow it across the planet's distinct seasonal changes. Sarah Al-Amiri, 35, was the UAE's Minister of State for Advanced Science when I visited Dubai in February. She has since become the country's Minister for Public Education and Future Technology. She had been obsessed with space since she was a child, but with the Emirates space industry an unlikely proposition. She studied computer engineering instead. By the time she graduated at age 22, what would become the UAE Space Agency had begun to take shape. Al-Amiri ended up working as a software engineer on two of the UAE's earlier satellite projects, Dubai Sat-1 and 2. By the time UAESA was touting the benefits of Hope's forthcoming mission, Al-Amiri was both the project's science lead and also the country's Minister for State for Advanced Sciences. The UAE's bold approach couldn't mask the fact that producing a successful space mission involving Mars is a monumental throw of the dice. At least half of the 50 missions undertaken since 1960 have failed. In the early 1970s, a frenzied race between the USSR and the US to land the first spaceships on Mars led to a number of failed missions. Recent attempts have had more success, but Mars remains a challenging destination. We comprehended the challenges. We understood the risk moving into this. We understood that the chances of success was 50% just from historic data. Al-Amiri says there was also the understanding of the amount of opportunity that will be created on the back of this mission that far outweighed any apprehension that we personally carried with regards to the delivery. says Al-Amiri. For us, it was an immense opportunity that we were grateful to be part of. This was a very important program for the space sector in the UAE and for science and technology at large within the country. Every single person knew that if they did not succeed in achieving their one small task, it could jeopardize the overall program. That's the sense of accountability that each individual had, says Al-Amiri. And we needed to have a team that had an internal drive for the success of this mission. Understanding not only that it's getting a mission to Mars, to amazing science, it's also about transforming a nation-changing culture, creating a beacon of hope. Despite their drive, skill and determination, the team faced one enormous setback. Hope was due to launch in 2020, just as the coronavirus pandemic began to sweep the globe. Dubai's crowded airspace and the congested waters of the Persian Gulf make space launches from the UAE impossible. The launch had to take place from Japan, but the impending pandemic caused a flurry of last-minute panic. The UAE had to negotiate with the Japanese government to keep their airspace open long enough to fly Hope out of the UAE. At the same time, Sharaf had to create three different teams: one to prepare the spaceship for travel, one to travel within to Tokyo and then go into quarantine, and another to travel beforehand, clear quarantine, and then receive the spacecraft. The only problem, the UAE's space agency didn't have enough team members, so some had to be flown from LASP, Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics in the US, to Dubai to make up numbers. Some spent weeks embedded with the launch crew on Tanegashima. Hope had to be transported from Dubai aboard a giant Soviet-era Antonov heavy lifter carried in an oversized clean room container. On touchdown, it was transported from Tokyo to a southern port and made its way to the launch facility via barge, a low-tech solution for a very high-tech passenger. The work to launch the spacecraft on time continued, though many of the Hope team had to work from their homes as the UAE went into lockdown. I asked Al-Amiri if she hadn't sometimes wished for another 18 months' time, despite the looming deadline for launch. Yes, she says, but adds they adjusted to working in the pandemic very fast. From the get-go, the team was making decisions about which tests they could carry out under lockdown conditions and which they needed to move. Team members volunteered to head to Japan, even with a quarantine. On my end, I was liaising quite a lot with the UAE government across the board, because there were bans on travel, speaking to the ambassador from Japan and our ambassador in Japan, says Al-Amiri. At the height of the pandemic, you are talking to the exact same people that were trying to understand what was going on with the health care system. Al-Amiri says, I would have been very understanding with the individuals that I spoke to, with all the headaches that they were going through over the past months. But people were highly cooperative and highly supportive to make this mission happen. At no point did we say, okay, our contingency plan now is to delay launch, but by 2 years. I'm really glad that never crept into the conversation. The deadline to reach Mars by the time the UAE celebrated its 50th anniversary came with an extra caveat. You can't just launch a mission to Mars anytime you like. US space engineer Brett Landin, who worked on the Emirates Mars mission with a team in the US, underlines just how unforgiving the launch window can be. You can only go to Mars every 2 years, he says, and so you plan for a particular launch opportunity, building in the 2-year pad just for the possibility that we have a global pandemic that wasn't on our radar. We asked the team, are you guys willing to go travel and be quarantined in Japan for, I can't remember what it was, 30 days, 2 weeks, where you are going to be stuck in a room. And I had no shortage of volunteers who said, oh, heck yes, I'm going. I want to see this launch. And the Emirati team was the same way. I mean, we just had full support. So yes, it was more challenging, but there's no way we were going to let that stop us. Al-Amiri joined the team, who oversaw Hope's final preparations before the launch in Japan. On the isolated spaceport, some 43 km south of the southern island of Kyushu, the July 2020 launch went entirely to plan, and Hope started its 7-month journey to Mars. The countdown was on for the team at the NBRSC to put Hope into orbit around Mars. By February 2021, Hope was approaching Mars. Back on Earth, the UAE's government turned the event into a socially distanced spectacle, with crowds gathering outside the Burj Khalifa, lit up in Martian red to mark the occasion. It was timed for 1930 local time, traveling at 120,000 km per hour relative to the Sun. Hope began a 27-minute long braking maneuver to burn speed. Had it failed, the spacecraft would have been slung out into deep space. A number of the press team who worked on the Mars mission tells me the maneuver had to begin some more than 2,300 km away from its intended perhaps some 1,060 km above Mars, the point where the orbit would be closest to Mars' gravitational attraction. The maneuver had a tolerance of plus or minus 300 km. This after a journey of nearly half a billion kilometers. And after all this, the spacecraft would only be able to communicate for a few minutes before the far side of Mars lost to all communication for 15 minutes. For that time, McNabb says it was Schrodinger's spacecraft. The endeavor both a success and a failure until mission control could confirm Hope had entered its orbit successfully. As the crowd in Dubai awaited confirmation, Al-Amiri was on stage speaking to the press in front of a screen beaming forward growth and bustling activity back at the Space Center's mission control. She knew what to expect during this nerve-wracking period. The normal process, which had been practiced and rehearsed before, was for the project director, Sharaf, in the control room at MBRSC to go through checks with various teams. This would include his team in Dubai, a backup team, their partners at LASP in the US, and the engineering, power and navigation teams. But via the live feed, Al-Amiri noticed Sharaf making some additional checks. He checked with two different individuals, the person that had the propulsion data up and the person that had the energy power subsystem. That was not normal for him to go check. Al-Amiri says it was live on stage. What's wrong? That wasn't what we described. So forming in my head. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? What happened? That wasn't in the script. Next came an uneasy silence. I was like, he's just double-checking the results. It's normal to happen, to check the telemetry that's coming from the spacecraft to ensure that everything's okay. But internally, it was a scary moment for Al-Amiri. Just seeing that out of sequence, 2 steps that he took prior to arrival, and that the deep breaths he gave prior to announcing. I berated him so many times for it. He said it's not intentional. I didn't intend to create suspense, but after he did that, and knowing that that's out of sequence, and then standing there taking a deep breath. Why would you take a deep breath when you are announcing something? Al-Amiri's assistant had an envelope with a speech written in case the mission was a failure, hovering nearby, as the wait for confirmation grew longer. The signal the spacecraft emitted, confirming it had completed its orbit, took 11 minutes to make its way across the 190 million kilometers separating Earth from Mars. But succeeded it had. Hope was in orbit around Mars. The failure speech was never read. Al-Amiri later threw the unopened envelope in a bin. The mission's success was reported around the world. But for Al-Amiri, the best was yet to come. The proudest moment, I'd say, was to see the first unprocessed image from Mars. She says that unprocessed image was beyond expectation. Even with the challenges that we had with the camera on board, it was amazing. I can describe that image on and on. I think I read to somebody, said, look how beautiful it is, and it looked a bit greenish. They're like, what is this? I'm like, no, you don't get it. You don't get images unprocessed like this. National pride and kickstarting new areas of the country's economy were also important, Sharaf says. It's about creating an advanced science technology sector and ecosystem in the UAE. It's about having a ministry for advanced science. It's about having this default industry, he says, adding that the impetus came from the very top of the country's government. Sheikh Hamdan, the country's crown prince and son of the ruler Sheikh Mohammed Al Maktoum. He mentioned to me this multiple times, Sharaf says. It's like I want this mission to prepare leaders that we can put in multiple sectors. It's about having that mindset, managed risk-taking, or like a smarter approach to things when it comes to risk-taking. Sharaf is a prime example of this. Months after my visit, he's made an assistant minister in the government. Hope's mission is a proud moment for young nation, but national pride carries little weight with the global scientific community. What will cement the mission's legacy in the decades to come is the science. Mars has little more than 10% of the Earth's mass and lies 50% further away from the Sun. But the atmospheres of the two planets share some basic similarities. Like Earth, Mars has polar ice caps. There are seasonal variations in its weather. Some of them, such as violent dust storms, visible to our instruments on Earth. The presence of ice formed by the hydrogen and oxygen in Mars' thin atmosphere shows that the planet once had the right conditions to support microbial life. It's not proof that Mars had life, but certainly is a clear enough sign that it was possible. Thanks to half a century of Martian observation, we also know that some of the planet's weather patterns that mimic those found on Earth, such as the katabatic winds. These form around the poles and flow across the ice. When they reach troughs and depressions, the smooth airflow becomes more chaotic, raising huge clouds of ice and dust. Hope's mission, as it unfolds, may uncover more about the similarities and the differences in the weather between the two planets. Al-Amiri has now moved on from her role as the project's science chief that has been taken over by Hessa Al-Matroshi, a computer science specialist who joined the program in 2015, initially to work on the mission's ultraviolet spectrometer. Al-Matroshi speaks to me over June in November 2022, days before the Emirates Lunar rover mission is set to launch. The search for clues as to how Mars weather changes is one of her top priorities. We wanted the science to be unique, yet relevant, and something that is on demand and needed, says Al-Matroshi. There were specific gaps that were highlighted by the community that had been studying Mars' atmosphere. If, for example, we have rovers and they are measuring data through day and night, we are missing the global coverage because we are only studying one location. And then when we have orbiters that are getting global coverage. We are missing the day-to-night variations because they are sampling the atmosphere. We're taking observations at a specific times. Bridging the gap between these ways of monitoring Mars is undoubtedly challenging, but that is what Al-Matroshi plans to do. It's very different. Mars, as a planet, can surprise you, she says. To get the most complete picture, hope must peer into the layers of Mars' atmosphere, see how the chemical composition changes from the upper reaches to the surface. We want to understand the link between them, how processes and how the climate changes and impacts the escape of hydrogen and oxygen at higher altitude. Al-Matroshi says we knew by designing such a mission that we will get insights that we haven't seen before because such observations weren't available. Before Hope, detailed knowledge of Mars' thin atmosphere was patchy at best. Al-Matroshi explains that earlier probes had discovered that some of its Earth-like atmosphere of hydrogen and oxygen was disappearing into space because of the planet's weak magnetic field. We are paying attention to those too, because these are the basic components of water. Al-Matroshi says. So if we are talking about life, this is something really important to understand. The models to help a lot and try to simulate what is happening and try to make sense of the situation. But then these models are built based on observations, and it's based on, the physics that we understand. So if we don't have complete observations, then of course there's limitations in the models that we are using as well. The missions that have gone to Mars had their own objectives, and there's always new questions to be asked. So even right now, as we are studying, we do have questions, and this is where I see that no mission operates on its own. This is where the collaborative community between scientists and other missions come together. Gaining more knowledge about Mars' climate may help with how we study long-term weather patterns back here on Earth, including what, in the long term, climate change might mean. Mars went through a major transformation billions of years ago, says Al-Matroshi, and understanding such processes of how past Mars became present Mars is important, because we want to understand what happened to our planet, because there are some similarities between us. I wouldn't say like we are exactly the same. For example, we do have a great magnetic field that is protecting us from the sun. Mars doesn't have that. It doesn't have the protection that we do. So that could contribute to why such drastic changes happen. Hope's primary Mars mission is due to last 1 Martian year, the equivalent of 2 Earth years. Already Al-Matroshi's science team are looking beyond that. During this year that we had our observations, the sun was not high in its activity. We weren't at the top of the solar cycle. That could change if the mission is extended, leading to some very different observations Right now, we are seeing a lot of sun activity lately. How that does impact Mars' atmosphere. Understanding that would give the UAE team a deeper insight into the past. Because trying to understand how such activities are impacting the Martian atmosphere in terms of escape, in terms of the climate, in terms of the dust storms, and so on, can give us some guidance of what happened or contributed to the changes that we've seen in the past, and we can derive some insights that could help us on Earth as well. Weather hasn't been the only discovery. In August 2022, Hope sent back the first detailed images of a patchy aurora in Mars' upper atmosphere, which suggests a chaotic meeting point between the planet's atmosphere and the solar winds. Scientists had previously expected Mars auroras to be relatively uniform. Hope's mission will extend to next February, all going to plan. Al-Matroshi is already looking forward to what it may uncover in the months to come. No Mars year will be the same, she says. For example, this year has been a light one for dust storms, while some regional storms have raised. A truly global storm hasn't been seen. I can only imagine if we were able to observe such storms that engulf the whole planet. The excitement in her voice is palpable. Even over June, it's really exciting. There's a lot of science to untangle